My name is Justin Nagard. I'm the creative director and publisher of Connect to Northern Westchester. Thank you for joining us. Today, I am at Magazzino Italian Art, speaking with Lucio Pozzi, the internationally acclaimed artist whose work has been shown in institutions such as the MoMA, the Whitney, Chicago, all over the world. Correct me if anything's wrong. Currently, his show, Qui Dentro, in here, is currently on display in Magazzino through June 23rd. Over his long career, Pozzi has refused to be boxed in by style, medium, or expectations. He moves between painting, performance, installation, and more. His work, in my view, has challenged viewers and critics alike to let go of categories and embrace uncertainty. Sound all right so far?
Uncertainty is the key to creativity.
All right. And I'm honored to have a chance to speak with you. So
yeah,
thank
wonderful.
You very much.
Thank you so much. Nice to be here with you.
Yeah, so I'm looking at this show right now. I mean, I know it reflects a lot of your career. So this is a very broad question, but I mean, how do you feel about your career? I mean, when you look at all this, how does this all make you feel?
That I'm just starting.
Yeah, that's a good answer. Yeah. Now, did you have a time in your life that is your favorite, or has it just been one long journey?
No, always hang on for dear life.
I like that. I'm going to circle back to that later, I think. Let's go back to the beginning. It's a cliche question, but I want to ask it of you. Did you have any pivotal moments in your childhood or as a young adult that really set you on this path that you would want to speak about?
When I was 4, I had appendicitis, and catgut from the fascist regime, which was badly made because they did not want to import anything from England anymore, rotted in my stomach, and I got a septic infection for a month, which basically was for a whole month near death.
Wow.
And I think it marked me forever and made me understand that every day is precious and should be creative, and I should keep being active all the time.
That's what life is about. How about artistic influences?
Artistic influences?
Yeah.
My parents divorced at one point. After the war, there was a judge which gave very few divorces before the Constitution eliminated divorce from the Italian law again. And so my mother, at one point, after a few years after, first met and then married a British sculptor called Michael Noble, who entered my life and made me discover there was such thing as contemporary art, and one could make art. And I got saved by that. I was a totally unhappy teenager. I was bound to become a businessman in Milan, and the arrival of this man brought the whole different dimension to my life. He was very creative, but also very destructive because he was alcoholic. And so he gave a lot and took a lot and primed me to a very creative life, basically.
Now, if you hadn't known him, there's a good chance you wouldn't have gone down that road?
No idea.
No idea.
I had no idea that contemporary art, I knew contemporary art was being made, but my family was a bourgeois family that collected some old art, but I was interested in design and architecture to a certain degree, but I was a teenager who did not know where to go, basically, like many.
I think that's supposed to happen.
Yeah, many. It happens for many teenagers.
We're not a political company. We're not a political magazine. But I have to ask you, and I don't want to forget, your view of fascism, and if you see anything today that seems familiar.
Aha. Do we have around 6 more hours to talk? So anyhow, my family's wealth was probably due to fascism.
Yeah.
And I grew up with a mother who was anti-fascist. but she owed her wealth to fascism. So it was a nice contradiction, and I was not aware of it until I became an adolescent. I began to question things. And I grew up in an atmosphere in which, after the war, to be against fascism was the most active way to be for intelligent people and for the enlightened bourgeoisie, which I happen to be part of. So I grew up with an idea of critique against fascism. My father was more sympathetic for law and order without being a fascist, but he had been able to live through it more easily than others. Anyhow, immediately in the beginning of adolescence, I got attracted to the more liberal-minded magazines and movements, minoritarian all the time, kind of humanistic liberalism, to use an American formula.
Right.
Because in Italy it was not called that. A kind of moderate reformism.
Yeah.
And I got involved with that. I got involved in student politics. I made national posters for the student movement, which was a reformist, moderate movement at the time. And I got even among the first followers of the founder of a very tiny party, which was instrumental in Italy in changing many things. The name of the party was Radical Party. It was not radical, though. It was a liberal reformist kind of way of thinking. But it was a movement that caused many reforms. It caused the inner changes of the left and caused the legalization of divorce in Italy, forcing the big parties to participate into that new legislation, and really woke up Italy to very many reforms that were in a direction of making society more flexible and more tolerant and more open to discourse. This all happened after I left Italy to come to America, which was in 1962. But I was one of the early followers of this guy, and I designed a magazine and published a magazine for the movement, for this little movement. Fascism is, I think, part of modern life. It's the roots of it. I am not an historian nor a sociologist, but the roots of it are in the 19th century, I think, and it's always ready to try to take power when there's moments of crisis. Sometimes it provokes crisis, and it is. That's why we need 6 hours to only start a conversation. You have to decide about the need for polarization in modern life, and let's come also to make a parallel with art, since we are talking in art. There's a tendency that starts in the Renaissance towards being bewildered because agreement about the connotations of culture begins to fray because of capitalism. The world begins to be explored, and capital begins to be flexible, not anymore static. And so people began to worry about not having anymore a common handle to hold on to. And you see it in the arts. In the 16th century, everything that was taken for granted in the arts begins to be doubted. Why? Because there were the faith in there being a common aim for art begins to not to exist anymore. And the same begins to happen more or less up and down in politics. In the 1600s, the first criticism of art starts, when art needs to be explained to the public. And art was obvious until then, for millennia. A man called Vasari in Florence begins to explain art and architecture to his audience, because it was not obvious anymore. This continues tumbling on until the 20th century, when a total chaos begins to develop, and contradictory ideas begin to develop. Now, in politics, something similar happens. There's a tendency of panic and the fear of generating the inner creativity of a society. So this fear generates panic, and the panic generates relaxation of civil rights in order to abandon one's subjective power of decision to some big power, some big papa or mama that takes the responsibility for us. Mm-hmm. We surrender our liberties. So the tendency comes often in moments of crisis to surrender your liberty in order to put in charge someone else to decide for you. These people inevitably take advantage of this. First they pretend to defend you, and you feel that they are liberating you from what you dislike and what in society, what brings you confusion and what seems to take advantage of you. And then they take advantage of you themselves, and they start as defenders, and then they turn against you and they exploit you. But it's not completely a modern phenomenon, because if we look at the tribunes of the plebe in the Roman Empire, mm-hmm. the tribunes often led revolutions in the name of the people against the elite, and then started exploiting the people who brought them to power. So it does happen often in history. In modern times, I think it's become more typical, and in waves it keeps happening.
So do you view it as an unavoidable wave? This is a flaw in the way that we're made up?
There's a tendency to it. Nothing is unavoidable.
Yeah.
And politics are based on contrast and conflict, if possible, in a democratic discussion. And we hope always for the democratic debate to take over. But we have to remember that Adolf Hitler was elected democratically by the majority of Germans. And this happened also with other dictators. I don't know the history well, but Mussolini did it because of a popular movement of support, but he came to power through a kind of coup d'etat. Mm-hmm. But there were other dictators who came to power through election. It happens often. So the method which was tested in ancient Rome and probably also in China, who knows, by people who defend some tribune who defends the people, and then takes power and takes advantage of them and begins to dominate the people and take away more liberties than what they lost, happens again and again. It's not inevitable. It has to be fought in the democratic way as much as possible. It has not to be surrendered to. And people going into a square and protesting is very important. It has toppled big dictators before, and it can topple dictators again if they happen to become dictators somewhere in the world. Somewhere in the world. Including our America, which we love.
Nothing else I can say to that.
It happens in art too. In art, we have been dominated by dictatorial movements. Mm-hmm. Modernism, which was a liberatory movement, ended up landing itself into all kinds of dogmas. People have to be surrealist and have depend on the dream. At the same year, people have to be geometric because that's the best art one can make for the modernity. Or people have to be a art that is socially oriented, and art that's not obviously socially oriented is bad. Or else art has to be absolutely not socially oriented, because art that has an agenda that's political or social is bad. And these are polarizations that do not conduce to discourse. They conduce to just dictatorial manipulations that in our case happen to be not manipulated by the market. But also in culture this happens. So it happens all over it's a conflict. It's a conflict in which the creative person, who is critically aware, mm-hmm. tries to defend her or himself from dogma and from anyone taking advantage of him or her.
That's design, right? You can't leave the grid.
Oh, my goodness, yeah.
Never leave the grid.
I mean, it's an eternal, in modernity, it's a conflict that probably has always existed, but which has come to the fore in a more clear way.
Yeah.
And now in a period in which the whole world is available to the whole world, inevitably all the languages mix and all the conflicts come in tension with one another. Even conflicts come in tension with one another. So it's a moment in which we have to be aware. And what can we do? Be totally, thoroughly engaged in being honest to ourselves.
All right. What brought you to America? Why did you want to come here?
I came because I was divorcing in Italy.
So you escaped.
It was like, no, I had a myth of America, really.
Yeah.
I came because someone handed me an application for a seminar in Harvard, which was directed by Henry Kissinger, and I was his guest for a summer seminar in Harvard. And but I wanted to come to America. I wanted to come to New York, and after the seminar, I walked from 125th Street to Chinatown and found a loft within a few weeks and started painting.
When I think of you, I don't think of Henry Kissinger.
I'm sorry?
When I think of you, I don't think of Henry Kissinger.
No.
It's interesting.
I tried to convince him, because he wanted to have lunch with each of us, and I tried to convince Henry Kissinger of the political value of abstract art. And I will remember all his life, all my life, I will remember, he was a very kind person,
Yeah.
and the face he made in declining my suggestion. It was very interesting.
I can only imagine.
Yeah, but I was provoking him, of course,
Yeah.
because I knew about him enough.
Well, I applaud your efforts. So your career, of course, spans multiple decades and crosses into multiple different mediums. And obviously you've successfully avoided, as you've alluded to, you've successfully avoided being boxed into one particular category.
Yeah,
How intentional was that?
intentional.
Yeah.
Since my childhood.
Yeah.
Always intentional. I started with a critique of the modern movement, which I also followed, and I wanted to re-understand it for myself from inside, and not being able to, or not even wanting to revolutionize anybody else's life. I started self-criticism. I started to analyze myself and understand my points of reference, and slowly built a way of thinking that allows me flexibility and a dynamic way of thinking that never takes anything for granted,
Yeah.
but still allows me to focus very, very much in every single moment of my artistic life. Every work of art has to be, in my opinion, very intense for me. I hope it is also intense for others, but that I cannot know.
No, it's good. I think it's people's inclination to categorize everybody.
Yeah.
And it's I don't know if it's laziness or an insecurity, but I try that even in my own world. Whatever conversation I'm having, I don't like to let people know exactly where I land on anything,
Yeah.
because as soon as you do that, you get all the baggage from whatever that group was.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you don't really have a conversation after that.
And also conversation with yourself can get warped
Uh-huh.
by if you allow yourself to be caged, to be boxed into one category or another. But categories are interesting after the fact. You can do a taxonomy of dinosaurs against brontosaurs or kangaroos against elephants, not against, but different from elephant, after the fact.
Yeah.
But in the creative moment, for us to box ourselves in the creative moment, that's a big danger that our society brings us. We are encouraged to box ourselves ahead of time. Instead, it's inevitable for us to be ourselves, our time, and our culture. And in our artwork, to let it surface without us knowing is the art.
Yeah.
To pre-decide it is censorship. And we're encouraged to pre-decide it and censor our creativity. And so we fight in order to survive and be able to develop a method of work that allows us to have whatever we are surge like water from the sand instead of pre-deciding it.
That's a beautiful way to put it. In America, it always drives me crazy because I always feel like students, he's the art student, and she's the science student, she's the math student.
Yeah.
it drives me crazy because it gets in their mind at a young age that this is who I am,
Yeah.
and they don't want to branch out.
Absolutely, but it's, you know, it's ironic that I am beginning to be classified as a man without a category, and so I'm beginning to be expected to do that. And I'm starting to do shows only of one little kind of work. I'm having a show in a tiny gallery in Hudson in May, in which I have only one kind of work, which I'm preparing now while this is going on. And it has its own diversity.
So are you categorizing yourself to avoid being in a category?
No, not me, but people are beginning to do it.
Yeah.
So I can fall into it myself. But see, the change has to come from here, where the heart and the mind meet. And it comes from a kind of openness and anger, something that opens up your premises. If it comes from a pre-decision, you're fried. So if I decide I must change all the time, I'm fried, I'm finished.
Yeah.
So I zigzag between full persistence into one kind of mode of thinking, and then when I get really fed up with it, or when I know I do it too well, then I get angry with myself, and then I hop to something that seems different.
Yeah.
As time passes, there's not so much difference.
Well, I have here...
Remember this sentence. As time passes, there's not so much difference between my works.
I have a quote from you where you once said, when I know something well...
That's it.
Yeah?
That's what,
I need to switch to something that gives me more panic.
yeah, that's what I was actually hinting at before.
Yeah.
I need it because I can see that I know how to fix a painting in that mode I'm working, or in whatever method, technique I work.
Yeah.
And the moment I know how to fix it, according to some premises of mine, that means that I'm in danger of relaxing the creative leap that Einstein cared very much about in terms of creativity, also in science.
So is it about losing your edge, or how would you describe it?
What?
Is it about losing your edge, or how would you...
Moving the edge?
Yeah, is it about you feel like you're getting comfortable?
Yeah.
And you're not going to expand?
But that comfort is not real comfort. It's surrendering to premises that are already known. Discovery means that something is covered for you, but not be discovered for others. But for you, if something is to discover, it's because it was covered, and by walking almost at random, you discover it, and you uncover something that gives energy to what you're doing.
Yeah.
Now you might be discovering something that of a kind that someone else has already done, but for you it's a discovery, so that's to be cultivated.
When I work with artists, or even myself on the publication, if we have a conversation about what are you thinking, I don't give it too much credence, because I know when you're actually creating something, you're going to make a line go in a certain direction that you didn't anticipate.
Yeah.
And it's going to send you in a completely different place than where you thought you were going to go.
Yeah, that for me happens almost normally. I start with some kind of goal on my own, and it inevitably gets betrayed by the process of doing.
Yeah.
There's no way. But if you want to do it on purpose, it does not happen. It has to happen because it happens.
That's a good point.
Yeah.
You've described figuration and abstraction as a kind of disease of taxonomy in our culture.
If they're dogmas, yes.
Yeah.
If they're instruments, they're completely okay. It's take a circle, it's an abstract mandala, put two dots in it, a vertical line and a horizontal line underneath it becomes a mask of a human being. So what's the difference in terms of quality? The quality will come for how you do it, but the quality will not be tied or blocked by whether it is recognizable as a mask or whether it is an abstract disc. So the theme, the category is not what gives quality. Quality comes from how you handle whatever you're handling. But in terms of strategy, there's no difference between figurative and abstract. Just, you take a dot and you handle it a little further.
Yeah.
It becomes a nose. You can add another two dots and becomes a face. You take the dots away, it's a potato. So what's the difference between abstraction and realism? I think that the regulatory difference is extremely boring. It brings me to that which I call is the symptom of our time, which is the competent yawn. Ay, ay, ay.
I like that. I say that I hate when people do competent work.
And the difference is, how do we decide, you know?
Yeah.
And you might decide it's only competent, and I might decide it's genial. And there starts the dialogue. In other words, we will never agree, but by talking about it, we feel alive.
Yeah. You've said, I will never finish anything, and once compared Picasso's idea that a painting is complete from the first brushstroke to Einstein. So what draws you to the concept of never being finished?
No, it's experience, it's not a concept. It's I really don't never know when it's finished.
Yeah.
And I've had paintings even that were exhibited several times and have been reproduced, and then I changed them radically. So I've one gigantic blue painting that was shown in pretty big galleries and was shown many times. And the last time it came back to the studio, the white square, which was in my origin, was intended to become black, was painted black. So now it's not. It was reproduced with a big white square. Now that square is black, and I cannot make it white anymore. So that's what it is. And who cares? Life goes on.
Well, that brings me to your approach. How do you want people to read your work?
I want my work to prompt them to their own spectatorial creativity, because we don't have an agreement about the purpose of art anymore. We don't have the criteria for making it, nor for looking at it. Agreed upon criteria. We have instruments. So I would like my art to be an occasion for the spectator to be able to invent her or his gaze while they're looking. And probably they will find in my art things that I have not seen in it. Sometimes they might see in my art things that I see, and might even have maybe an interpretation of it that might correspond or be similar to mine. But what I'd like the spectator to do in my art is to be able to feel creative, so that even what they look changes while they look. And the spectators are not used to that anymore. They want me or you to guide them, to say, you must see this in that work of art. And I want to remove that if I can. I'm not powerful enough to do it all the time, but I want to give the opportunity for that to happen.
Well, you could be somewhere like here, you could be at an opening, and how often everyone's just looking over their shoulder to make sure that they're looking at it the right way, right?
I don't know what the right way is. Some people are very quick, and sometimes people who don't look at contemporary art see more than other people are more involved, or sometimes the opposite happens. Every one of us is a universe, and we project from it things that we ourselves don't know. The whole thing is a constant jumble of meetings, frictions, separations. And what interests me about contemporary art, it has reached this level in which the exchange is in constant change. And even the interpretations, we cannot fix them. If you tell me, if you write an essay about these two pieces, and you might change your mind in 2 years, and it might not correspond at all about what I say. And I might suddenly say, oh, after 2 years, you've changed your mind. And I might say, well, 2 years ago, he was doing something that I did not see. I would agree with it now. So it changes constantly. What interests me in contemporary art, it's not fixed anymore. It's a constant change. It can disappear. It can reappear. And we don't know the value of it. We know that it attracts us, that it stimulates enough discourse to make us feel that there is value there. But we don't really know the value. If 100 people say, in this show, that painting is better and this one is worse, doesn't mean it is so. One person might say, oh no, but this one is better. But basically, they are all projecting their taste, which is part of this flexible, unresolvable discourse of contemporary art, which is what interests me.
There's another aspect I always feel in the world of art as well, which is what is that person going through, right? How often have you heard a song and 20 years later you hear it again?
Yeah.
But your life is very different and you hear it completely
Very
differently.
good example.
Yeah.
So when you and I see Rembrandt, we don't see it like people 40 years ago, and surely do not see it like people 500 years ago.
No.
That's very correct.
Yeah.
I'm sorry, sometimes I use too many words, and you instead use a few words, and you say it better.
I don't think so.
I don't mean to flatter you, but that's the feeling.
You recorded that, right? No, that's nice of you. Well, you did say, I loved another quote you said, which is that artists used to look for solutions, and now they create their own universes.
Yeah, I think many artists still look for solutions because they gauge themselves sometimes to rules or dogmas that come from outside. But I find that for me, not to look for any solution, actually not even to have intentions beyond the data I start working with is very important.
Yeah.
And I would not know even what a work of mine would resolve. It is, I try the work of art to be just itself, like I try to be myself, which is almost impossible. And solutions are solutions in certain fields. Solutions are dangerous.
Yeah.
They can be dictatorial and take away and bring censorship because they are apparent solutions. But you need solutions when you build a bridge. You build a bridge, and the solution is it does not collapse. But in fields like art that has no agreed upon purposes, I think that it would be pretty artificial to impose solutions.
So when someone sees your show here today at Magazzino, there's nothing to tell them. You just want them to see it for themselves. And feel it for
what
themselves.
I can do is I can put myself in front of them and say, have you seen this?
Yeah.
Have you seen this? Oh, often they say, I did not see it yet. You know, like there's here 3 watercolor landscapes. Mm-hmm. And they were framed, and I had them in my studio, and we hung them. And I was pleased by the choice of the curator who chose them. And during the opening, someone came to me and said, well, the one on the left that has that pencil square drawn in the sky, it's a very interesting idea. And I said, it has a pencil square drawn in the sky? So that painting was made, I don't know, 10, 15 years ago. Until now, I did not know it had a pencil square. And now I can see it very differently because it has that square. It's like a piece of these was brought into there.
Yeah.
I'm not sure the curator saw it. I will ask David if he did see it. Because it links the whole series of watercolors to the whole show. But it happened by chance. If David intended it, he's a genius.
Don't tell him that. He'll say yes right away.
I will test him and see if he knows about it.
Do you have any concern or thought to legacy?
I think we can go on talking for 6 hours. I'm very glad you lifted the political analogy.
Yeah.
Because it is an analogy. Art seems not to be political, but as I try to convince Kissinger, abstract art is political by taking a stance in the option of even doing that, which has no agreed upon applied purposes. And I think there's a political stance there which is very important in the name of freedom and a respect for the individual universe, both of the author and the viewer. So I'm very glad you raised that, and as a last word I would say you're the first one to raise the political aspect, and it is a minefield, and I appreciate you having encouraged us to dare try to approximate a walking towards it.
It's only political now, I feel, but 50 years from now it's going to not feel so political, it's going to feel moral. And so that's...
Politics keep coming in. Everything we do is political. Politics comes from polis, which means the city in Latin, the town. And we are part of a community, inevitably. Yeah. Even if we isolate ourselves, we're still part of a community. Someone noticed that the hermit who leaves the community is still a path that links the hermit to the community. So he is linked anyhow.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but if someone's an artist, a creator, if they can do anything in our society, let's say today, would you feel it's their obligation to do so?
No obligation ever.
No.
If you want not to do art, it's good. If you want not to look at art, it's completely okay. There's no obligation. Art is a volunteer work that one does for oneself with the possibility of sharing it with others. Only those who want to stop and look.
Yeah.
And there's no obligation whatsoever. And there's no obligation to do art that's diversified, nor to art. You can make, one of the analogies I work is, you have a keyboard. You can make a symphony by just playing only one key, one sound, all the time, all your life. And you can even make a symphony, like John Cage indicated, by sitting in front of a piano, opening it, and not playing it. That's also art. In other words, you can do whatever you want, and because we have no agreed upon purpose of art, now there is this freedom which frightens very many people. But we are empowered like we have never been to be individual in art.
Yeah. Was it I think Thelonious Monk, who said that the real song was the space in between the notes?
I did not know that, but
No?
I don't remember it, but maybe I quoted it because it pleased me very much.
Yeah.
It's like here in this show in Magazzino, we worked on the void as much as on the art. The voids are art themselves. Mm-hmm. And I remember the installers here are three artists, and the curator is very creative. And I remember sometimes we were trying this and that and that, and it was by measuring the void that we understood where the placement would be.
So everything is very well thought out, but at the same time
Spontaneous.
spontaneous.
Yeah.
I like it.
So
Magazzino's treated you well?
Magazzino was a very lucky encounter.
Yeah.
I never met a small community like this that's so harmonious and so creative.
Is there anything else I didn't ask?
I think you have covered the beginning of a maybe 20-year-long conversation. You touched upon such key words and concepts, it's endless.
All right. I'll order a pizza and we'll keep going another time.
Yeah.
All right.